Minecraft.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the show. Before we get started on that though, I'll tell you a couple of things, just mod changes. I've updated to version 23 of all of Reka's mods. However, I got rid of the Void Monster mod. It really doesn't do anything, so I didn't see much of a point in having it. I like it for the ambiance it creates, but honestly I'm not down near enough to the void often enough for it to even be something that comes up on a regular basis. So anyway, before we get started, let's go ahead and tour my base just a little bit so you can kind of see the things that I've been doing and what's been going on. We will head over here first, I suppose. This is the automated farming area. And you can see here I have a bunch of RotaryCraft fans. And right now all I have planted is canola. And there's one that just got ripe, and then you can see the fan blows off the ripe part of it and leaves the base of it still planted. So the fans automatically harvest the crop, and if you want the technical details, it replants a seed. But I prefer to think of it as the fan blowing off the harvested part of the plant. And the fans also will blow them in this direction, so you can see I just have a line of hoppers that leads down to this chest, which fills up very quickly. I have that full of canola seeds, as you can see there. Then what I've been doing is transferring the canola seeds over to this chest, which is currently also full, and it goes through hopper systems. I have 4 separate grinders here processing the canola into lubricant and then dumping them into this 4-piece reservoir. This is 4 reservoir pieces. Each of them store 64,000 millibuckets or 64 buckets. But when it puts, it considers this to be a large multi-structure. So when it puts, if you put anything into it, it'll automatically even it out amongst the 4, and you can put as many reservoirs together as you like. As you can see, I have trouble keeping, I haven't even been able to fill this one up, so this is plenty big enough for me. All of these fans are operating off of 1 steam engine, and in fact I can operate up to 16 fans, which is what I originally planned out here to go all the way to here, but I quickly discovered that I did not need that many for what I was producing. For a while here, I had also planted lettuce and cucumbers. And if we take a look here, you can see I have all of these cucumber salads. And remember that each cucumber salad will take 1 lettuce and 2 cucumbers. And I currently have, what is that? That is 6 stacks and a little bit of cucumber salad. So that's quite a lot. And as I've mentioned before, I don't even go through it all that often. And then I still have a lot of cucumber leftover, cucumber seeds, etc., and some lettuce seeds as well. And then for a while I put down some cotton seeds, and I generated a whole mess of cotton, stacks and stacks and stacks of cotton. So I just went back to producing canola seeds for the lubricant, and even then I'm producing way more than I could ever possibly need. Over here I have the woodcutter from RotaryCraft, and it does pretty much what it says. When this sapling grows, it will cut down the wood and replace the sapling. And down below here is where it drops its stuff, and so I get the oak wood from it, as well as a little bit of sawdust. This is the little bit extra that you get, and in fact you can combine, I think, 4 pieces of sawdust into maybe a piece of wood or something like that. But you get this little bit of sawdust. That's the reason why you should use the woodcutter. You can also put a fertilizer next to the woodcutter, and it will make the trees go faster. But honestly, I don't have much of a need for wood, so this is plenty good for me right now. This is a fermenter, and it runs off of a DC engine. And what the fermenter does is, this is how you make ethanol that you would use in your gasoline engines. You also use the ethanol to turn into jet fuel. So you need to start with this fermenter. The way the fermenter works is it needs a little bit of water and it needs the right temperature, as long as it's in this green range. And if you're in a normal biome, you'll be in that green range. Too cold or too hot and it won't work. And I haven't actually started using the fermenter yet. What you do, let me go, actually I'm going to need to start working on it anyway, so we'll just go ahead and get started with it. Let me grab some, oops, I don't know why I grabbed that. Let me grab some dirt. I grab a stack of dirt like so. And if we go over here, I've already started grinding up some sugar canes. And essentially, each sugar cane that you put into the grinder will produce 3 sugar instead of just the 1 that you normally get if you're doing it in your crafting bench. So this gives me an excellent output of this sugar, and I was going to wait for it to get to the point, and I thought I could time my speech to match it, but I'm not that good. Anyway, here we go. And there you go. So see, I get 3 sugar each time. So over here in the fermenter, there's actually 2 stages. The first stage is creating yeast. And you make yeast by combining dirt, I think, on the top and this sugar on the bottom. And it's the other way around. Oh, I've got to turn the engine on first. That would help. There we go. Yes, and so now you can see it is making yeast. And you'll also notice that while it uses the sugar each time it makes a piece of yeast, it does not always use the dirt. So that's something that's important to note about the fermenter. I'm going to let that run a bit, and we will come back to it in just a bit. It does require water, so I have it hooked up to water. This is my sugarcane harvesting system. Very few mods seem to add a way to automatically deal with sugarcane. I think it's because the growth nature of it is different from the regular crops. But what I have here is a block update detector from the expanded Redstone mod, which is also one of Reka's mods, and the block breaker from the expanded Redstone mod. And pretty basic, the block update detector, when it detects a block update, will send a redstone signal that I run around into the breaker itself. So basically, when this sugarcane grows up, the update will detect it, send a signal, and the block breaker will break it and just drop it into the chest behind here. And so that's how I'm getting sugarcane. I may need more sugarcane production, but since I have not yet started on doing stuff with the fermenter and the sugarcane, right now I'm doing pretty good with it. So that seems to be sufficient. My fermenter is done. So you can see I now have 64 yeast. And I'll take that out. And what you do with the yeast, I need to grab a couple of things. First thing I'm going to need is another lever. Oops, type in the box will help me here. So let me grab a lever. And I'm also going to use leaves. I got a ton of leaves. Now, this next stage, the next thing you do is you have to change stages of the fermenter. If you notice here, the target is yeast. This is making yeast. If you just put down a lever and switch it, you'll now be making, I don't know what this is. I think it's, that might be ethanol dust or something. I'll tell you when it gets made. And in this case, what you're going to use is yeast on the top that you made in the first stage, and then in the bottom you have to put any kind of plant material. And remember that RotaryCraft is primarily based upon vanilla Minecraft. You can use saplings or flowers, leaves or grass. What I have noticed is that if you use something that requires shears, like in order to get leaves you have to use shears, they produce twice as much than using something like, say, saplings, which you get just by knocking down leaves, chopping down a tree or something of that nature. So I'm just going to go ahead and use leaves because they're easy to obtain. You just go out with some shears and you can obtain a whole bunch of leaves. And put those in there, and then there you go, you can see sludge. That's what it's called. It's called sludge. And in this case, what you'll see is one of the leaves or whatever plant material you put down here is used up on each cycle, but they're also producing 2 each time. A yeast may or may not be used on each cycle. As you can see, I put in a full stack of both, and sometimes the yeast is not being used. So you can actually create quite a bit of this sludge. The sludge we throw into a furnace, and that'll turn into the ethanol crystals, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Okay, I already showed you here the grinding setup, which is what creates my lubrication for my various gearboxes and other machines that require it. Very simple hopper setup, just distributes things throughout these 4 grinders. And of course, as you saw, I was using this particular grinder to grind up some sugar. Over here I have a bunch of AC engines. Now, AC engine, let's go back over here. This here is a DC engine. And if you remember when I talked about that, DC stands for direct current. It just needs a redstone signal. You put a solid redstone signal into it, and it will create power, just not very much. The AC engine, which stands for alternating current, requires a pulsing signal of redstone going into it. So I just have this very simple redstone comparator subtraction clock, which can be turned on and off with that lever, and it creates a pulse and it sends it through to all of these AC engines. This AC engine here is what I am using to charge industrial coils, and I have an industrial coil here. If you remember from the last episode, I said that the industrial coil is what caused my explosion that happened over here, and the reason is, you can see here that says a maximum energy of 720 megajoules. Once you exceed that point, it will explode, and it explodes very violently. You can see here I have stored 672 megajoules. What I've done is, if I put the coil right here, this comparator will emit a redstone signal proportional to the amount of energy in the coil. And I have it set to being a length of 14, because the maximum it could be 15. So at 15 would be when it's at 720, but that would be, you would be hoping that it would shut off instantly, and it probably wouldn't. So I have it set to 14 out of 15, and when it does, it just disengages this clutch, which turns off the power flowing into the coil, and so thus leaving me at somewhere around 670 megajoules of energy. In fact, I have another coil here. It's also about the same amount. Now, and that's powered by, I don't have this AC engine hooked up to the thing right now, and the reason I don't is because, in addition to requiring this pulsing redstone signal, they also run on something called a magnetized shaft core. And you see this one is magnetized to 544 microteslas. And as long as it's receiving that pulsing signal, it will run down the shaft core, and I see no reason for it to do that when I'm not currently using this for anything. These two AC engines here are combining in power, and they are powering my ME controller, which is for my applied Energistics system, which currently all I've done with it so far is I have the ME drive, and you probably already remember seeing over here I have a crafting terminal, and there's access. I have all my stuff in the ME drives, and there's my access to all of my inventory, which helps me get rid of all of the chests that I had scattered all over the place before. These two AC engines here are both powering magnetizing units, and these magnetizing units is how you magnetize these shaft cores. So in fact, if you just saw, it was at 310 and it increased to 311 microteslas just a minute ago while I was hovered over it. Now it's at 312. These magnetizing units also need a pulsing redstone circuit or signal, so that's why I have it coming in. And what's great is that the AC engine requires these magnetized shaft core, but it will, using it to power one of these magnetizing units, it will charge up a shaft core to far more than what it has originally. So this 449 microtesla shaft core in this AC engine will charge this shaft core in the magnetizing unit to well above that amount, maybe 2 or even 3 times that amount. So it gives me a self-perpetuating cycle, if you will. And then I use another AC engine over here with a magnetized shaft core in it. And what this one does is it is powering my extractor, which is currently working on some iron that I have in there. And normally the AC engine emits, well, you can see it emits 131,000 watts of power with a torque of 512 and a speed of 256. However, if I switch and it runs through a 16-to-1 gearbox and a 2-to-1 gearbox set to speed, I now have 16 newton meters of torque and 8,000 radians per second of speed. And that 8,000 radians is enough to handle this stage. And before, when it said it had 512 newton meters of torque, that's enough to handle this stage. So how I have this set up is to this item here, which is called a multi-directional clutch. And what that does is it has a setting inside it, so when it receives a redstone signal of various strengths, it will output in the direction indicated by the color. So in my instance, what I'm telling it is if it receives no redstone signal or a signal of 0, to output to yellow, which would be this direction, which it just goes straight through and is using straight the power. But if it receives a redstone signal, which is the maximum, which is 15, it will emit the magenta side, which goes this way, which converts the power into speed and then runs back in to the extractor. Now, that is all hooked up via this complicated looking contraption over to here. So this may take a little bit. Hopefully this will make sense. It may not. It took me a while to come up with this design. What I have here is a redstone clock, which emits a signal on a regular basis. That runs into a toggle latch. When the toggle latch receives a signal, it will either turn on or turn off, depending on what it was before. And then that signal separates into another toggle latch, and also just the direct output from the first toggle latch. What that causes is it causes there to be 4 different states. When both of these are off, when this one is on, that's one state, when both of these are off. When this one is on and this one is off, that's another state. When this one is off and this one is on, that's a third state. And when both of them are on, that's a fourth state. What happens is when both of these are off, then this is an AND gate here. So this redstone torch will come on, and that will provide a redstone signal into this signal emitter from expanded redstone. The signal emitter will emit a redstone signal over the air with no need for wire in a straight line only to a signal receiver. And what's really nice is that this works vertically. And if you've ever had to run redstone wire vertically, you know what a pain that can be. So this is really nice. So it emits a signal to here, which transfers its signal to this emitter, which transfers a signal to here, which transmits the signal to this emitter, which transmits to this receiver, which goes to this emitter, which goes down to this receiver, and this goes down into the clutch. Yes, I know it's all very complicated, but it's the only way I could do this without running a bunch of redstone signal all over the place. Effectively, what this does is that, as I said, this signal will only come on when both of these are off, but there are 4 different states. So essentially, 1/4 of the time, this clutch will be receiving a signal, which will put it into its higher speed mode, and 3/4 of the time, it will stay in the higher torque mode or the default mode. The reason I did that is because this stage here is the slowest stage when they're running. These stages run really quickly. So if I just had it on an even keel, 50% of the time it was doing these stage and 50% of the time it was doing stages 1 and 4, I wouldn't be as effective because this one takes so much longer than these. So instead I'm doing it where 25% of the time it runs on stages 2 and 3, and 75% of the time it runs on stages 1 and 4. So if I go over to this redstone clock, and you can set it to different things. Let me set it to this, which is 1 second. You'll see what happens here. So there for a couple seconds it's on, and then for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds it's off. So as I said, 1/4 of the time it's on, 3/4 of the time it's off, and if you look here it's off, now it's on speed mode, and then it's back, but it's longer on the torque mode than it is on the speed mode. And here, if I hide this, you can see here's torque mode for 3/4 of the time, and then it will switch to there you go. Well, it happens a lot quicker, but so the idea is that the stages 1 and 4 will run 3 times as often as stages 2 and 3. And what I have this set on is to 1 minute. And because of the way these toggle latches work, that ends up being 2 minutes on stages 2 and 3 and 6 minutes on stages 1 and 4. But essentially what that gives me is an automated extractor setup, because I can dump an ore into here and it will automatically process all the way through, which is very, very nice. All right. Over here is what I'm calling the thermal expansion area. And again, I'm using a multi-directional clutch with no signal emit to the black side, with the yellow signal emit, or with a full signal emit to the yellow side. And I put a lever here, and this just allows me to control. As you can see here, right now I have it positioned this way because when the lever is in this direction, it's powering this side. When the lever is in this direction, it's powering that side. This energetic infuser is full of power. If I flip this like this, you will see this induction smelter is now gaining power. Flip it back, it's now going to the energetic infuser, so the induction smelter is not gaining any power. I mentioned that there would be need. This is run by a steam engine, which is hidden back behind here, and some gears. And this is the rotational dynamo. RotaryCraft allows you to convert power to and from thermal expansion, buildcraft, and industrial craft power. If you remember in the beginning of the series, I said I picked thermal expansion. I had to pick one of the 3. I went ahead and with thermal expansion. This energetic fuser I needed because it's the only way I have to charge my armor other than using the built-in kinetic generator or something of that nature. And this induction smelter I needed due to a bug that's in the current version of RotaryCraft, where this electrum blend does not get done properly. You can see the gold flakes, which are generated by RotaryCraft, can be combined to make this electrum blend, but the silver flakes never come out as part of the recipe, which is the bad part. So if I use my extractor to get gold flakes and silver flakes, I can't combine them to make electrum blend. However, I can smelt the gold into ingots and the silver into ingots and then combine them in the induction smelter, which is why I have that. So basically I have the steam engine back there, which powers these rotational dynamos, which power either the induction smelter or the energetic infuser. Of course, I could have one for each, but I don't use them all that often, and thus I didn't want to provide power to each one constantly. The other thing, of course, is I could convert power into thermal expansion power and then store that in, what are they called, leadstone batteries or redstone batteries or something to that effect. But again, just remember that I'm not trying to use thermal expansion, I'm trying to use RotaryCraft, so I'm not doing something of those nature. I'm only doing this when I have to, like with the Minechem mod. The chemical synthesis machine and the chemical decomposer machine will not run on RotaryCraft power. If you remember over here, the applied Energistics system does run on RotaryCraft power. I'm able to supply power directly into the ME controller, and that's pretty nice. But the Minechem mod does not work that way. So it's the same setup. If I have the lever facing this way, that means I'm powering the chemical decomposer. If I have the lever pointing this way, it means I'm powering the chemical synthesizer. All right, I showed my ME system. I cleaned up this area a little bit, put the blast furnace down here because the lava is still underneath it, and that was an easy way to kind of keep it out of the way. And everything else is pretty much normal. I cleaned up things a little bit. Oh, I moved my water filling station, if you will. It's running also off of an AC engine, which is powering 3 different pumps, which puts the water into this 4-piece reservoir here. And in fact, out here, right there, there's another 4-bit reservoir. I'll go out here as long as there's no monsters that are going to jump out at me. And the only reason this one is here is because when it rains, if you have one of these outside, when it rains, it will fill up. And then it will drain down into this reservoir, so it's a nice like secondary source of water. And then of course I have my automatic door. Open, close, open, close, which I really enjoy the heck out of. And what I've done here is, and I will probably end up, I'm afraid that I'll end up breaking something, and knowing me, it's a very, very good possibility. So let's go ahead and go down. There we go. This is a proximity detector, and it's from Expanded Redstone. And in fact, you can detect players or mobs, hostile mobs, friendly, passive or friendly mobs, or anything at all. I have it set to detect players, and when it detects something within its range, it emits a redstone signal. Boop, like that. See, it's on. If I put it to hostile mobs, it's off because there are none within its range. Okay, and so that redstone signal is being emitted into this signal emitter, which is going all the way up to that receiver right there. And as I mentioned, that's a nice convenient way for that to work. And let me get back up here. Let's see if I do this right. There we go. All the way back up. There we go. To the signal emitter, which is right there. And then all that does is run the redstone signal around to both of the well, so much for that idea. Try this again. Come on. Runs it around to both of the iron doors, so that essentially as I get close enough, it opens up the doors, which is cool. It's not perfect because the detector can't be directionalized, if you will. Like, I can't tell it to only look up. It looks within a radius around itself. So you can see, like, here the doors are closed, but if I step down here, the doors are open. Closed here, open here. And that's because that one step lower is close enough to that proximity detector to set it off. But for the most part, this works the way I want it to. It opens for me automatically when I want to leave or come out, and closes, and mobs won't be able to open it just by walking up to it like you would with a pressure plate. It's not as inconvenient as having, say, a button or a lever or anything like that. Works out really, really nice. Okay. That is enough of the base review. I think that took way too long, to be honest with you. Alright, let's go over here and check on the fermenter. And there we have our sludge. So we're going to take our sludge over to our furnace. And I didn't mention this before. This furnace here is hooked up to, you can't see it, but it's a friction heater that's behind here. And I have it attached to a lever which will activate it or deactivate it. When it's activated, it turns this redstone lamp on. What the friction heater does is, number one, it creates heat within this furnace. And the nice thing about it is it means you don't need any fuel in the furnace. And in addition to not needing any fuel, it speeds up the smelting process. So we put the sludge in here and we end up with ethanol crystals. The reason I have this friction heater on a lever is the RotaryCraft handbook warns you that if the friction heater runs for too long and the furnace gets too overheated, it will melt. Now, I'm pretty sure that means it will turn it to lava. I have not yet had a furnace melt on me, but I think from that terminology, it means that the furnace would get turned into lava. And while that in and of itself isn't a huge loss because a furnace is just made out of cobblestone, whatever else that lava touches may get destroyed, and I don't want to lose other parts of my base, such as the extractor. The reason I put this next to the extractor is because most of the time the stuff that I'm putting into the furnace is these flakes that are coming out of here, and so it makes sense just to be able to switch them over real quick. Anyway, so this is how we make our ethanol. Oh, I guess I should say that's why I have this light on. That's just as a warning to me, you know, because a lot of times I'll put a stack of something in here, walk away, and go do whatever else, and if I forget about it, it's a quick, easy reminder that, oh yes, I've left the friction heater on, and then I can come over and shut it off. And that way I can make sure I definitely don't. I'm able to get through a full stack, I know that, and I've had it run a little bit longer than that, so I don't know exactly what it takes to cause the furnace to melt down. But I don't want to, again, I don't want to run the risk, and I don't want to test it the hard way to find out. So anyway, that is the base overview. I've already determined that this episode will actually come out after my episode of explaining the Minechem stuff, so it may look a little bit odd, but that is because this base explanation took a little bit longer than I was really expecting it to. So anyway, I hope you like what I have set up. We're going to talk, or we'll see about the Minechem mod well, there's no point in saying this. Anyway, just a quick overview of my base. We'll be working on some other stuff next time. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.